I've commented a few times already that the way you say something in a contractual arrangement has extreme meaning. In our world, we tend to speak casually without measuring our words, but to them, every word and even the sequence of words was utterly critical. That's the topic of today's Mishnah. Okay, now, Mida ha-behevel ani meichelecha hein chaser hein yeser. I am selling you a plot of land as per the actual surveyor's measurement with the rope, more or less. So that's internally contradictory, and the Gemara will talk about that. Okay, now, hein chaser v'hen yoser midas hachevel. What if the guy says, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped. Batal hein chaser v'hen yoser mida behevel. So the second half of that statement, but more or less, seems to be a direct contradiction to the first part of the statement, accurately measured with the rope. Right? I mean, even I could figure that out. Okay, now what if he reverses the statement and he says, I'm selling you a base kur of land, hein b'chaser, hein b'yeser. I'm not sure, it might be a little short, it might be a little bigger, midat hachevel, according to the measurement of the rope. That's the, okay, turn the page. And now, batal mida hachevel hein cheser v'hein iser. In that statement, again, there's this internal contradiction, but the Mishnah tells us the fact that he says, I will measure with a rope, nullifies the plus or minus statement. Because once we measure with the rope, we'll know for sure. Okay? Divrei ben Nanas. These are the words of Ben Nanas. So we can see the implication of the Mishnah is the second statement is applicable, and the first statement is nullified by the second statement if they're contradictory. That seems to be the implication. Okay, now, why does it have only one guy's name? And how much of this Mishnah did he say? Omer Rav Ava bar Mamel, Omer Rav, in the name of Rav, Chokin Alav, Chavei Rav al ben Nanas, Nanos. The colleagues, in other words, the Rabbim disagrees with Ben Nanas and says he is a Das Yachid, and therefore we don't have this firm idea that the second statement cancels the first. He says it definitely does. That is disagreed with by the other rabbis. My Kamashmalan. So exactly what is Rav coming to tell us? Tanina, we already learned elsewhere in a Mishnah, Maisa b'Tzipuri, there once was a story in Tzipuri, somebody rented to utilize in his business the bathhouse that somebody else owned. So Shmuel is the landlord and Reuven is the tenant. And when they did the deal, Shmuel said, B'shnayim aser Zahuvim l'shana dinar zahav l'chaydesh. There were 12 denarim. He says, I'll rent it to you for a year for 12 denarim. Then he says, a dinar a month. So the question is, what does he mean by a dinar a month? Does it mean that it's the same number?
12.
Or does he mean that in an Uber year, you'd have to pay an extra dinar? It's easy to interpret that both ways. $12 for a normal year, but $1 a month in an abnormal year. Okay. Now, what happened was all this took place, say in the winter, and that year, the Bezdin declared there'll be an Uber year. So in Shmuel, whatever the first guy's name, I forgot what I said. The owner, in his mind, thought he was going to be renting it out for 12 months, but the buyer assumed he's renting it out for 13 months. What? Because it's an Uber yard, right? Okay. So now they went, the two of them wound up in court. Now we're going to, just to give you a heads up, we're going to learn that the exact date they actually went to court is going to play a role. But let's just read it as it comes. Obai Maisalifne Rabbi Shimon Gamliv Rebbe Olifne Rebbe Yaisi. There was a Bezdin and two very big heavy hitters, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and Reb Yaisi, were on the Bezdin. The Amru, and they both agreed, Yachalku es achodesh ha'ibur, that we're going to make the tenant pay an extra half dinar for the 13th month. That's what it appears to say. That they divide it. Yeah. So it's that's 12 and a half dinarim. Right. Okay. What?
Contract was either.
No, the contract was a verbal contract, and it's 12 dinarim for a year. And then he also added the words a dinar a month. So when they went to Bezdin, the owner said, I meant to make clear that although normal years are 12 dinarim, if it's an Uber year, he has to pay me a dinar a month, meaning the second phrase cancels the first. Same issue as our Mishnah. The renter said, no, the first statement was the applicable statement, and the second statement was merely an explanation of the first statement, that I don't want the whole money at the end of the year. I want it to be paid monthly, perhaps. Okay? So, but when they paskin, they said we can't determine whether it's the first statement that's applicable or the second statement that's applicable. And we've learned many times when it's such an issue, they split the money. That was Mumbaz, right? That was his opinion. We've used that several times. Now, let's try and interpret that. If we say that this court case, as reported in this brisa, is proof that we don't hold that the latter statement is the applicable one and the former statement is nullified by the latter statement, which is what Ben Nunus held. So this is a proof against Ben Nunus. Obviously looks good, right? But I can argue with that. Hava Aminim Hassam, who that's only in the case of this court case, where it's each guy really has a great argument, and they weren't sure what the rule was, so they split the difference. The Ikalamemer, I could say, Mahader Kahader Bey, that by saying 1 dinar a month, he was changing his mind and canceling intentionally the first statement. I'll give you to for 12 dinar a year, but I mean that to be a dinar a month. So there it's clear that he has to pay the 13. Or a dinar a month. I don't want to wait the whole year to get the money. I want to collect it a dinar a month. So it's clear that it's only 12 dinar even for a 13-year month. Both arguments are very good. Okay. Ve'ikalamemer perushi kom meforesh. That it's possible to say that he was just interpreting, not canceling his first statement that most years are 12-month years and I want to be paid. But when it comes back to the Mishnah, the Vade call Haderbe, that the second statement is clearly a contradiction. Either I'll measure it with a rope, or you'll buy what looks like a base core. It can't mean that that's an interpretation. Okay, is that clear? You look puzzled, Bobby.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so aim alone. So I would say that case is totally different, and the bathhouse case is not dispositive of anything.
There's no such thing as common business practice or.
Of course there is.
precedent.
Well, the halacha is if there's common business practice that we interpret the contract according to common business practice. But this was obviously not that. Okay, if everybody knows that you pay extra rent in an Uber yard in every time you rent, or then it would be no question. Or if everybody knows you luck out if you get a couple of Uber yards in your rental term, then in other words, it can't be that it's clear common practice. Yeah.
Doesn't the base didn't have to say this is right or this is right? They can come up.
No, they can make sure. At most Bezdin, when you go to Bezdin, you sign a piece of paper that says if the Bezdin makes a pshara, I will accept it. Because if I owe Bobby money, in his opinion, and in my opinion, I do not, one of us is going to be gravely disappointed because you're sure you're right. Bezdin usually, if I owe him $100, Bezdin will say, give him $50, and shake hands and be friends. Now, you can also say to the Bezdin, I do not want a peshara, I want you to paskin. But in this case, there's no grounds to paskin unless you hold like nanas. So there's also, we're going to see that it's not as simple as it looks. That's why I pointed out before we started. If they have the Bezdin on the 1st of the 13th month, or if they have the Bezdin at the end of the 13th month, that might be a pshara. But what if they have the Bezdin on the 15th of the 13th month? Then the court could say, you've had it for these 2 weeks, pay him a half a dinar and go home. And the Gemara is going to do just what I just said. All right, so let's go weiter. What? All right. So Kamash Malan, that Reb Shimon and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and Reb Yossi hold like the Chachamim, and they disagree with bananas. So okay. So now let's look again. Amar Reb Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Did I skip? I think I skipped. No? Yeah, I did not skip. Okay. Amar Reb Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Zu Divrei Benanas. This is the concept of Reb Nanas, that the two contradictory statements, the second cancels the first. They say, hold with that, whether the beginning or the end is not automatic. It's whatever is less. So in the case of a 13-month year, we would hold that it's 12 dinar for the year. In some other case, we might hold that by the latter statement, if it modifies and gives less. Let's say I'll give you the field more or less, we'll measure it with a rope. And then the actual field is a little bit more, but now we're measuring with the rope, we cut off that strip. So we go with the less, whatever is the lesser. That's their suggestion. Okay? Zu velo svirale. Now, let's go back and we're trying to figure out what Shmuel means. And maybe Shmuel is simply telling us Ben Nanas' point of view, but he's saying, by saying that's what Reb Nanas says, the implication is that I don't agree with it, right? Oh, that's what Bobby says. But I clearly don't agree with him by saying that's what Bobby says. So that's the possibility. Oh, Reb Shmuel, the Omer, Rav Shmuel, the Omer Travayu, both Rav and Shmuel agree, Kur b'shleishim ein a. If I'm selling you, we had this case before. If I am selling you a kur of grain for 30 sloyim, now it just so happens that a kur of grain contains 30 sayas, right? So if I say I'm selling you a kur for 30 sloyim, do I mean that the kur package deal is 30 sloyim? And maybe a smaller amount would be more. Or do I mean it's a saya for seller? Does everybody understand the question? Okay. So, Yochel Lakserbo Afilu B'Seya Acharayna. We have a rule that until the transaction is, quote, complete, unquote, either party can back out. So if I dump 29 into your truck from my hopper, and then somebody calls me and says, you know, the price went up, I can cancel the transaction because I haven't delivered it all yet. Or if somebody calls the buyer and says the price went down, he can cancel the transaction because it hasn't been completed. He didn't get it all yet. Okay? And the Rav and Shmuel both agree to that. Okay? Rav and Shmuel, the Amrei Travaihu, they both agree. Kur b'shleishim ana meichelach. I'm selling you a kur for 30 slayim. Yachol lakser bo. Either guy can back out. Afilu b'seya acharayna, until the very last say is in the truck or in his wagon, whatever. Okay, so that okay. Kur b'shleishim seya. But if he says a little differently, kur b'shleishim seya, b'sela ani meichelach, seya b'sela, I'll deliver a kur to you. That's 30 sayas, and the price is 1 sela per saya. Then each saya is considered a complete transaction, and you agreed to buy 30, so nobody can back out, even if it's only one that's been delivered. So we see the wording is critical. One is I'll sell you 50 pounds. I'll sell you a ton for $2,000, $1 a pound. Or I'll sell you wheat $1 a pound, and I'll deliver 2,000 pounds. That's the difference. In the first statement, it's understood the $2,000 is for the whole ton. And if I haven't delivered the whole ton, then it's not a complete transaction and either party can back out. But if I say, I'll sell you wheat $1 a pound and I'll deliver you a ton of wheat, then the agreement is you'll pay $1 a pound for wheat. So as soon as I've given you 1 pound, we've completed the transaction, and each additional pound means you just owe me more money. The way you word it, in America, it would be a little bit different because there'd be a sub clause if in the event I can't deliver the whole thing, and everything would be spelled out in a written contract. But these are verbal contracts, and as Bobby points out, it's the minhag makom. In other words, we go by what's going on, and it's understood in that world that the wording makes this difference. That's what the rabbis have told us. All right. So now we see that each seya is in the second wording. Each time you get a measure, that you pay a seller. Okay. So what we have to decide here is Zeus Virale, that this is Shmuel's opinion, and that's also Ben Nanus's opinion. Because Ben Nanus said the second statement is the applicable statement. So now we've contradicted our previous argument that Shmuel disagrees with Ben Nanus, and now we're saying, no, I have a proof that Shmuel agrees with Ben Nanus. So those two views cancel out, and we still don't know for sure who Shmuel agrees with, whether it's Ben Nanus or the Chachamim. So Svarale, does Shmuel really agree with Ben Nanus? Great big question mark. Ha'amar Shmuel, we'll listen to what Shmuel now. Shmuel has what to say about that court case we just talked about with the bathhouse. The guy came on the 15th of the month. Okay. And that's exactly what the case was. So the Bezdin said, you have this for this half a month, the 13th half month, pay him for a half month. And it was not a compromise. He was saying, pay as you go, pay the half a seller and go. All right. Now, if the guy came on the 1st of the month, kula lamaskir, we would say that since he's paying on a monthly basis, he has to pay the whole 13th dinar, and that would be not like Ben Nanus, okay? On the other hand, if the guy came to Bezdin on the 29th of the month, then we would have to rule like the rentor, because he didn't give him that month's rent yet, and might say Alavaraya, he can't. The other litigant can't collect without a solid proof, so he wouldn't get the extra dinar. So this court case says nothing about Ben Nanus's view. Okay, turn the page. Ella. So here's what we wind up finally concluding. Okay, the Gemara is interrupting the conversation between individuals, and the Gemara is speaking. Elaliyalamzu the lo sevirale. Rabbi Shmuel does not agree with Ben Nanus. He says Elaliyalamzu, that's Ben Nanus's idea, the lo sevirale, and I don't agree with it. The Hasam time of my. What was the story? What was the reason for the psak in the bathhouse case? Mishum the typhus, namiho the typhus. Over there, each guy had a typhus, had a good claim. The one guy says, look, I'm renting it for a dinar a month, and you're there for a 13th month. You owe me for a 13th month. And the other guy says, no, I'm renting it for 12 dinarim for a year. Both claims are really solid. So even if you say it's a compromise, it's because both guys can grab hold of a serious proof. And therefore they came up with the Shara. Now, Omer Rav Huna, Omer Bei Rav, in Rav Huna tells us that in Rav's yeshiva is Torah Meya Meya. If you, again, the wording issue. And Ishtara is a coin that is 20 times heavier than a copper zuz. However, if you take an Ishtara to a banker, to a shulchani, he will give you 16 prutos for it. Okay? So if you go to the store and you buy something that's 15 prutos and you give him an istera, he'll give you 1 pruta in change. Nevertheless, a istera is, in another sense, 20 prutos. I know it's complicated. So here's what happens. Istra mea ma'e. I will sell you I will sell you a certain weight, 100 ma'os, for an istera. However, okay, and you have to pay 100 ma'os. But if he says mea ma'e, 100 ma'os, istera, and istera, you have to put in an or. And you can pay less by giving him the istera, the other coin. So in that case, you only have to pay the istera because it was the second statement. So this seems to be a support to Ben Nanas. My Kamashmalan, what does Rav Huna teach us here? Toifes Lashon Acharon. He says that you grab hold of the second statement. If he says Istra Mea Ma'e, you have to give 100 ma'os. If he says Mea Ma'e, Istra, you only have to give an Istra. So this statement in Rav's yeshiva is clearly a proof to Ben Nanas, right? My Kamashmalan, what is he trying to tell us? Taifes Lashon Acharon. We question mark. We go with the last statement. Ha Amra Rav Chadazimna. If that's true, why would he teach that in that formula in his yeshiva? He told us this already. The Amra Rav Have Hasam. If I had been present at that famous rental of the bathhouse story, if I was the Abbezdin there, Havna Kule Lamaskir, I would have taken his last statement that it's a dinar a month, and I'd have made the renter pay the 13 dinarim, whether it's the 1st or the 15th or the 29th of the month. I don't care. He's got it for a calendar year and he has to pay a dinar a month. That's the final statement. So Rav, back at the court case, it's plugged in here in the Gemara, but back in the court case, Rav took issue with that psak. And that's where he told us we always go with the latter statement. So why is his yeshiva bringing a different case and saying we go with the latter statement? That's superfluous. So now, okay, now you skip a bunch of words. Mahu detema. So what do we want to conclude over here? What might we have said in that story? that he says that Rav would have given the landlord the money because the latter statement was an explanation of the first statement. Okay, that after saying in a normal year it's 12 dinarim, but in a 13th month year it would have to be an extra dinar. That's what he meant by a dinar a month, and it was not a cancellation. Kamash Malan. That is dispositive. That Rav is saying that if the second statement contradicts the first, you go with the second. If the second statement expands on the first, then you go with the first. And that's how Rav would determine Kamash Malan. And tomorrow we will learn a Mishnah about what if you don't have a rope, but you've got pillars or rocks or a wall or something that defines the boundary of your property.
You need a laser transit.
What?
You need a laser transit.
They didn't have them there.
Sure, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Bobby, who's that? Who that?
Bobby.
Robert.
I come here that
I was thinking, suppose they're giving up this case, normally, time for tomorrow, you had a rental, it was after the term that you paid.
That's why he said, I want a dinar a month.
If you wanted to pay monthly.
Correct.
Coming up with the whole 12, and it turned out that year became a leap year.
Exactly. That's exactly the case.
That's the case. So if he kept his mouth shut, they wouldn't say.
No, if he kept his mouth shut, he would definitely lose. I want 12 dinarim for a year.
The guy was bananas.
That's the rent. That's the owner who says that. Then he says, "Uh-oh, what if it's an Uber year? Make it a dinar a month." So he clearly, I could say he clearly meant a dinar a month, or he could simply be explaining, "I'll give you for 12 for the year, but I want to be paid in installments."
Yeah.
That's how I interpret it. Others don't interpret it that way, but that was the easiest way to explain it.
I know up in New York, the standard lease on an apartment on the rental, just the total say it's for 3 years.
$27,000, $3,000 a month, right?
But it states that. So you
Yeah,
have
but
your
when-
option.
When we rented here, because I was remodeling my apartment, so we rent another one. He wanted $1,000 a month, and then I said to him, "How about I'll give you 10,000 up front for the whole year?" And he says, "Oh, that would be lovely," which was,
Have to go for,
what?
I have to go for
You
section my.
discounted, you spent
part-
Oh, oh,
And
you
that's the-
discounted $12,000.
Ultrasound.
No, I mean, I don't know what it would come out to, but I had the money. I just sold my house, right? And he was happy camper getting the money in
Have
advance.
a good day, Mr.
Then we had a problem. He said the kitchen was kosher, and a neighbor told me that the last year's renter wasn't Shomer Shabbos. So we had a whole tumult over well, you couldn't because it was such a cheap stove that the guy says he can't blowtorch it. So we made a deal. I bought the dishwasher and he bought the stove, or vice versa. I don't remember. But it wound up being an incredible bargain.
yeah.
And now I live here, which isn't such a bargain.
You ain't shoveling snow.
My wife, that was the reason we moved here. My wife said she's not willing to shovel snow. I never did. She did.
That gave Adam.
No, because she was a little old lady. The neighbor had one of those big snow blowers. So the little old lady went out to shovel and he took Rahmanis on her and he did it for her.
Hey, my kids bought me a snowball for my birthday.
Oh, yeah.
So
That was,
great.
yeah, but what you're not telling us, he was a 15-year-old
Oh.
and he didn't want to shovel.
What's funny is my birthday is in July.
Hmm?
So how do you buy a snowball in July?
Because they're on sale.
They don't have them out to show, but what they the store that in the summer he sells the lawn mowers, in the winter.
Right.
He sells nothing.
So at the end of the
So my-
winter,
so, yeah, so my,
you can buy a snow blower for half price.
But the guy said, okay, I don't have any snow blowers, but what I'll do is I'll give you
A claim slip.
Yeah, that's if you
Right.
put that in this happy birthday,
Right.
and sometime in October, November, you pick it
So,
up.
oh yeah, that's fine. That means he was giving you a discount and not selling you a remnant. That's a better deal because they usually make improvements year to
Tell
year.
you what used to take me 2 hours in the backache.
I hear.
I did it in 20 minutes.
Yep.
I had 60-foot footage also frontage in it.
Okay. I had 120.
Oh, that's okay.
Plus, I had the
If you live on.
100. I had a total of 220 frontage because I lived on a corner.
Yeah.
Everybody, why would you want to live on a?
Because that's where the house was.
I understand, but I'm saying, I mean, go shopping for a house, right?
Because that's the house my wife wanted. We had a we saw this house earlier. My wife fell in love with it, but it needed work. Then we had a friend who was making a Leah in 2 years. So I said to him, you buy the house,
Oh, wow.
keep a record of how much money you spend in the repairs, because his wife liked to do decorating and stuff. And I'll buy the house for what your cumulative cost was. So we got it 2 years later. And my wife worked with his wife so that the design was suitable to both of them. And then after that, I took out a tour of the whole inside and redid the house and made it 30% bigger. So we wound up with 6,000 square
Not
feet.
perfect.
All right, have a great day, all. Stay dry.
Not perfect. but-
You ever seen a vacuum these carpets?
With this design, why do you have to vacuum? Straight to begin with.
Just for the cookie crumbs, so the animals don't come and eat it. Those geckos and all the other stuff.
The other day,